Good evening, Mr. Lara.
Good evening, everybody. Mr. Valencia, good evening. Mr. Zimmerman, Ms. Herrick, Ms. Cornejo, Ms. Beltran, Mr. Anaveros.
I think we're echoing.
Good evening.
Yeah, Linda was really echoey.
She does that every so often. I think he broke the machine.
All right, so we'll call to order the Board of Education special meeting scheduled for 6 PM on 9/23/2020. Roll call.
Mrs. Flores,
Here?
Mr. Lara,
Here,
Mrs. Cordero,
Here?
Mrs. Oliver is absent this evening. Mr. Hollinshead.
Here. All right, we'll get on with the pledge. This is Flores.
Sure. Let's stand, please. Hand over your heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
All right, the long list of upcoming events. October 14th, 2020 is the next scheduled regular board meeting. Do we have any public comments?
We have no public comments this evening. We had one comment that was submitted after the deadline for item 7A.
Okay. There being no public comment, we'll move on to approval of the agenda as presented. Item 5.
I'll move to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Mrs. Cordero moved to approve, and Mr. Lara seconded that the board approve the agenda as presented. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. It was approved, and we'll move on to action item 6A, approval of the learning continuity and attendance plan. Deetra?
Good evening. Good evening, board members, superintendent, and all of our members of the public online viewing tonight. Tonight, our plan alignment team, led by Director Rebecca Herrick, will be presenting the learning continuity and attendance plan for final approval. As I stated 2 weeks ago, this plan is truly a multi-department and site contributed plan that we'll be bringing forward tonight. So we're excited to share that with you. So with that, I'm going to turn it directly over to Ms. Herrick.
Good evening, board members. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening, board members, Mr. Ontiveros, and cabinet members. I want to thank all of our department teams for their work on the plan and all of the stakeholders and their commitment to the collaborative process as we worked on the plan together in a short amount of time. So as a reminder, the learning continuity plan is intended to balance the needs of all stakeholders, including educators, parents, students, and community members, while streamlining engagement and condensing several pre-existing plans. It was important to align the COVID-19 written report and the school reentry and safety plan with the learning continuity and attendance plan. And it takes the place of the LCAP for the 2021 school year. The draft plan is in full alignment with our vision of student success and district goals. The plan includes actions and services that align with our LCFF state supplemental concentration grant funds, our federal title funds, as well as our federal CARES ESSER funds and learning loss mitigation funding. The funding timelines are fluid and they support the needs of our plans and also when needs arise in the future. So at our last stakeholder meeting on Wednesday, the 16th, we thoroughly went through the plan again. We reviewed the draft plan and we did gather further input. As we bring the draft plan for your approval this evening, it is important for stakeholders to understand that in order to best serve our students, that we will continue in our continuous cycle of improvement. So here's our GOBO infographic, and this is really a great overview of the plan. Again, we have our story, and we're close to 16,700. I don't know the exact number as of today. We have 21 schools. And then this really shows the 4 focus areas under supporting learning continuity. And they include the stakeholder engagement, distance learning, learning loss, student well-being. And then they do give an overview of all of our instructional phases. And we did start the year in our distance learning, phase 1. So I'm going to go through 2 sections of the plan and cover them a little bit with you this evening. That part of the stakeholder engagement wasn't completed when I came to the board earlier in the month. This section outlines the ways in which our stakeholder groups were engaged in multiple ways. It's based on the information collected and all of the surveys, the meetings, parent advisory groups, and other means of communication. And so out of all that information collected, these were the themes throughout what we found throughout the data. So first of all is stakeholders were interested in quality grade level instruction provided on a daily basis, synchronous and asynchronous. The second theme was expanded equitable access to resources to address and mitigate learning loss and meet social and emotional needs. The third was to increase support for technology needs. And the final one was expanded parent engagement and outreach. So the other section in the plan that I wanted to cover tonight, and I just have one slide for it, but it's the last section of the plan. There are 2 parts in this section. And it's called the Increased or Improved Services section. And this really mirrors the section that is in the LCAP, in the back of the LCAP plan. It's an exact mirror, almost identical questions. So the first part includes an explanation of the actions that are written into the plan that are provided for the entire school or across the district. It's an explanation of how the needs of the foster youth, English learners, and low-income students were considered first, and how they are effective in meeting our goals. So currently we have 92.6% of our students are unduplicated students. And unduplicated means that a student might be in more than one student group, but they are only counted once in that percent. So we have a lot of services that serve students across the district. So the transition to distance learning really provided us an opportunity to review some of these planned actions that were currently in place, and funds that are continued to be utilized district-wide to increase and improve services for all students. We do have extra attention to our neediest students. We believe that the actions and services that have been identified will ensure positive outcomes for all students across the district, as well as provide support services that meet the needs, conditions, and circumstances as a result of COVID-19. Qualitative and quantitative analysis of the increased and improved services will be reviewed throughout the year and through the phases of instruction as evidenced by improved student outcomes. So some examples of actions and services within this plan that are for all across the district. One of them is our elementary PE teachers. We do have 2 per site for our elementary students, and that's for students, all of the students in grades 1st through 6th grade. Another example is all of the distance learning supplies. The Chromebooks we purchased for all students across the district. And then a final example is our literacy rich environment. We're increasing our electronic library, increasing access to ebooks, take home books for students, and that will be across the district. So the second part of this section of the plan, it really talks about how we meet the needs specifically for foster youth, English learners, and low-income students. And so I wanted to give some examples as well. So we do have our bilingual instructional aids for our kindergarten, 1st, and 2nd grade students. We have our English language development instructional coaches, and we have our expanded learning programs. We have 1 full-time foster youth liaison, and then our counseling services. We have marriage and family therapist and our outreach mentors. And so those are just some of the services. We list them all in the back. It's a requirement of the plan. So at this time, those were the sections of the plan that I felt like I needed to go over more thoroughly tonight. The next steps would be board approval of the plan, and then filing the plan with the county, and then we would post the plan to the website. So I wonder if you have any questions at this time.
Now that I've unmuted myself, I was going to ask you with the MFTs and the other social, emotional folks that we have on staff, is in the plan that we can see an indication of how many of those folks are there per number of students, or if are they, you know, like is there one for every 300 kids or 500 kids or what have you, and then also like the bilingual instructional aids, is that the same thing? Is there one for every single classroom, or is that just what we're shooting for?
So I can answer for the outreach mentors and the marriage and family therapist. There's 1 per school that's funded by the district. So last year at outreach mentors, where every school had 1, but with MFTs, it was only if schools purchased them. But this year the district is purchasing 1 per school site. So all 21 schools have 1 MFT and 1 outreach mentor. Schools can choose to purchase more with their own site funds if they wish to.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Brian.
Sure.
And then I could answer the other question. So for our bilingual instructional aides, we have them in kindergarten and first grade, 3.5 hours for each class. And then we have them for second grade and they're split 1.75 for each classroom this year.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
No, I just asked
Okay.
Mrs. Herrick, and you did such an outstanding job that we're just going to have to, I think, wait for a motion.
Will the plan be posted on the website?
Yes, it will be. The draft plan has been posted and it will be posted on the website following approval.
Okay. I just had been expecting to receive a copy with any revisions from the prior meeting, but that's fine.
I could also, we could get you each a copy of it if you want. Some people like the hard copy, and we could provide that for you as well.
I'm getting pretty good at looking at stuff online. I'm letting go of my need to hold the paper.
All right.
It was linked to the agenda, to the electronic agenda, not the PDF copy, but you can go to the agenda page. There was a link there that it's. Yes, I saw that. Yeah. I know it's hard to hear when we're so close.
So you're waiting for a motion. Okay. I will move to approve the learning continuity and attendance plan as presented today, September 23rd, 2020.
Moved by Mrs. Cordero and seconded by Mrs. Flores that the board approve the learning and continuity and attendance plan as presented. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Flores? Aye. Mr. Laura?
Aye.
Mrs. Cordero? Mr. Hollinshead?
Aye. Motion passes. And we'll move on to item 6B, approval of the school plan for student achievement for 17 elementary and 4 junior high schools. Looks like Mrs. Dutra.
Tough job tonight. Just a lot of introducing. I can handle it. So tonight, the team from Plan Alignment again will be providing the board with an overview of our school sites, school plans for student achievement, lovingly known as SIPSAs. I do want to thank our school sites and their leadership teams and their school site councils and all other staff that are involved in writing these and the thinking that goes into them. So we thank them very much for their hard work in creating these plans for their school sites. And so I will hand that right back over to Ms. Herrick.
Thank you, Ms. Dutra. So again, good evening, board. And we are now going to review the school plans for student achievement. As Ms. Dutra said, we do call them our SIPSA plans. We're going to provide an overview of what is included in the plans for all 21 schools. And then we're going to hear from 3 principals this evening that will be sharing an overview of their plans. And I do want to thank Coordinator Johanna Chase. She's on the call this evening. She really took a lot of time to work with the schools and took lead on this. And I just appreciate her support. And I know the school sites did as well. So I want to thank you, Ms. Chase. So again, we are at in our continuous cycle. We're coming to the end of September. And I just want to share, we did start these plans in February. The site started the work in February, and we were really in the middle of aligning not our LCAP, the one we had, but our new district goals. We were really working on them, aligning them with the LCAP that we were going to be working on and with our school site plans. And then due to COVID-19, the timeline was adjusted. And now we are bringing the plans to you this evening for your approval. So the SIPSs provide a comprehensive plan for each school site. They include actions and services and proposed expenditures for the state and federal funds. The plan supports student outcomes and our overall performance in connection with the LCAP. This year, again, they're in connection with our vision of student success and our district goals. The plans also, they're support a cycle of continuous improvement. They are data-driven, and they reflect the changing learning environment in 2020-21. And they were reviewed and approved by all school site councils. All the SIPSs include the evidence-based strategies to meet school needs and how the strategies will provide opportunities for all students, including each student group, to meet state standards, strengthen the academic program, improve the learning time, and support enriched and accelerated curriculum, and address the needs of all students in the school, particularly those at risk not meeting the state standards. So the Every Student Succeeds Act, also the ESSA, it requires schools receiving Title I funds and operating under school-wide programs or schools identified as comprehensive support and improvement or additional targeted support and improvement, develop a plan. And so all of our schools are Title I funded and school-wide program schools. And then the schools we're going to be hearing from tonight are ATSI schools. So the following 3 schools are ATSI schools in the area of special education. To have an ATSI status means the state indicators, the colors are red or orange, or a majority of red and orange, in the state indicators for over 2 years. So remember that the data we are looking at came from the dashboard from fall 2019 and fall 2018. So we have Fessler Junior High School, and they exited CSI status and entered ATSI status, and this is their first year in ATSI status. Bruce Elementary School, they continued in ATSI status, and this is their second year. Oakley Elementary School, ATSI status again, and this is their first year. And you could kind of see the groups here and of the indicators of why they fell into the status for the student group. So for example, for students with disabilities, Fessler had oranges in chronic absenteeism, English language arts, and mathematics, and they had red in suspension. Okay. So I want to introduce Principal Palmerston, and he is going to go over Fessler's plan. And I'm going to continue to click for him. So if you just let me know and when you're ready.
Thank you, Mrs. Herrick, and good evening to the board. Rebecca, you could put all 4 boxes up on this slide, would be just fine for us. On behalf of our students, parents, and staff, I'm honored to share our work at Fessler Junior High with everyone this evening. In presenting about our current school plan, I wanted to take a brief moment to walk down memory lane and review our past plan. This portion of our school plan from last year included the presented summary of actions to support improved outcomes for all students. Our focus at Fessler was on creating the conditions for improvement, not on improving because of the comprehensive support and improvement CSI designation. While we are proud of our student progress, which resulted in moving out of CSI, there continues to be work to support continued and sustainable improvements in academic outcomes for all students. We'd like to acknowledge the time and efforts Linda Cordero committed to the journey with us throughout last year. Thank you for joining us on our CSI journey, Ms. Cordero. Slide 2. So just a brief overview of our CSI plan incorporated in last year's school plan is presented here. The next slide, please, Mrs. Herrick. For slide 2, this is our summary of our current school year plan with 4 main focuses. Our focus on continuing our work around Tier 1 instruction, with an emphasis on improving first instruction across all academic areas, continues. The next, transitioning to distance learning and adapting our instructional programs to be delivered synchronously and asynchronously. CSI and APSI, focusing on improvement, not on state accountability. And data systems, by continuing to work on improving data systems through the use of EduClimber. I'd like to recognize the work of our Dean, Mrs. Heather Page, who has taken the lead on us on the data systems in moving forward with EduClimber, with support from Dr. Winkler at the district level. Thank you to both. While Fessler is no longer identified as a CSI school, our dashboard metrics for our students with disabilities has resulted in Fessler being identified as an APSI school for the 2020-21 school year. In addition, as a result of school closure, there's been an extension of time when our remaining CSI funds can be spent. We have built the remaining CSI funds into our school plan, specifically on actions and services that will support improving academic outcomes for all students, with a focus on those students with disabilities. In closing, I'd like to share my appreciation for the dedication to our students and their academic success demonstrated by all staff on a daily basis. Thank you very much for your time, and I believe I'm turning this over to Luisa Caruso, principal at Bruce Elementary.
Hey, Dr. Palmerston,
Yes.
before you turn it over, just really briefly, I just wanted to compliment you and the staff at Fessler. The focus on improvement, not on a state accountability, I think is the kind of things that we need to be hearing. And I think especially to your point earlier in your brief discussion about the sustainability after all of this goes by the wayside, and I'm sure in your guys' case that will be because of the tier 1 instruction, because of that look towards sustainability. I mean, I think that's where our greatest hope is for kids to continue to close the gap and for things to continue to be equitable for our students. So I commend you guys on having those kinds of thoughts and that focus.
Thank you. When we focus on improvement rather than accountability, when accountability changes or no longer designates the same designation, we continue that work for the improvement of all students. And so,
right, and that's right.
Thank you for that.
And you've got a bar set high, not a ceiling.
Yes. Thank you very much.
And who's up next?
That would be me. So I'm Lisa Caruso. I'm the principal at Robert Bruce, and I would like to thank all of you for having me here so I can do a brief explanation. We are in ATSI, as Mrs. Herrick mentioned, for our second year. We have been working really hard with all of our student populations to put the right people in the right work for support. We have highly qualified personnel at our school in every manner, and we have been working in collaborative groups to support our students and to support our parents and to support staff. Those outside groups that have really been effective for us have been our MFT, our marriage and family therapist, our outreach mentors, and we also have been using the Fighting Back program with their supplemental programs to support our families and students. We are working within the aligned instructional system, and that is emphasizing the high quality instruction using the district supported materials and the curriculum. We have been focusing a lot on getting our teachers to dive deep within the curriculum to support all students and to do a lot of our mainstreaming, increasing the instructional minutes for our students with disabilities into general ed classrooms so that they are part of the entire school campus, and that then the teachers are able to push in and offer those supports. So you have additional staff in classroom, and we have found that we have seen a lot of success with our students' improvements in academic that way. We are working within high functioning teams So we have a school-wide environment of high expectations. We really feel as if every student can succeed if we set the bar high. As you said, Mr. Holland said, you set the bar high, but not on the ceiling. And our teachers have really recognized that, and the students are rising to the occasion, which is good to see. We also are encouraging our teachers to reach out to students to find more ways to encourage all populations to work together. We have kind of branched away from just the PE time for mainstreaming, and we really are pushing for the time within the curriculum. So the science, the hands-on science, and working with the social studies, math, and English language arts. And lastly, we have a shared vision of instruction, our classroom culture, which is great. Walking into classrooms, seeing students, I say walking, but hopping into classrooms via Zoom and seeing all students working and engaged and excited to be there. And students demonstrating that they can handle that challenging content. If we put the bar where they can see it and they create their own expectations, they're rising to the occasion. The students are taking ownership for their learning, and they have a vision of their future, which I think is very, very powerful.
Mrs. Caruso, when you're talking about the seeking to have the special ed kids integrated outside of PE, or is there in the current format that we're going to school in, is there an opportunity to do co-teaching or team teaching, that is?
We have a significant amount of our teachers that are actually considered co-teachers, and we are working to get them trained within the structure of co-teaching so that the students, as instead of just being as a push-in model, that there really is a formatted co-teaching model happening on site. So we do the push-in model right now, and as our teachers gain more instruction within co-teaching, then we are expanding those classrooms from push-in to co-teaching.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I think I am passing it off to Mrs. Ortega.
Good evening, board members, Mr. Ontiveros, Santa Maria Bonita School District staff and family members. I'm Christina Ortega, the proud principal of Oakley Elementary. As mentioned in the previous slides, Oakley was identified as ATSI, which is that additional targeted support and improvement, in December of 2019 in the subgroup of students with disabilities. So now I'm going to walk you through the plan that was created and implemented to ensure that Oakley successfully exits ATSI status within a year. So the four main goals written in our plan are Tier 1 instruction, transitioning to distance learning, the focus on students with disability, and the data-driven systems. So first, in Tier 1 instruction, we continue to focus on high quality instruction with effective use of instructional time for all students. And we do that with ensuring that students are having access to our core curriculum. Also this year, we are utilizing our instructional coaches to be able to provide additional support for that Tier 1 practices that are effective. Next, we have this new transition to distance learning, which we establish a culture of learning. Again, kind of a common thread that I'm hearing here is that high expectations. But with those high expectations, we also have to take in consideration, especially right now during distance learning, that we need to balance these high expectations with ample support. So we need to ensure that students are motivated, students are engaged, that we're reaching out to students and families to see how we can best support to ensure that students are participating and students are engaged in their learning during distance learning. We're also ensuring that we're adapting all the core curriculum, the board-approved core curriculum, the programs and supports that our students with special needs and disabilities also have access to those programs. And then next is the ATSI. And I had mentioned that our subgroup or our focus group are students with disabilities. So some of the things that we implemented and that we continue to work on is ensuring that there is the push-in model, that our resource specialist is pushing in to support students during their core curriculum. So not only are students being pulled out during Tier 3, but that students are given plenty of opportunities to be able to access that core curriculum. We also want to ensure that students in special day classes are being mainstreamed even right now during distance learning. Not only is it happening during social studies or PE, but that it's happening during the core curriculum of English language arts and math. Also a need to collaborate, the constant collaboration between the general education teacher and the special education teacher to ensure that we are implementing the IEPs with fidelity. And then all three, Tier 1, distance learning, and the subgroup of students with disabilities are constant in our conversations with our data-driven systems. The systems and team structures that we have in place at Oakley are our cost, the MTSS, our professional learning communities, and also the conversations that we have during the IEPs and SSTs. So again, this is just a brief summary of what we're doing to ensure that students with disabilities and all students are receiving adequate and appropriate support. So I am confident that our plan that was initiated and briefly explained to you here ensures that all students, including the students of disabilities, will get that additional targeted support to increase student achievement. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega. And I know that on your campus, I've seen those practices in action, and so I know you've got a great team on that. And I wanted to acknowledge and say I appreciate your recognition that while we have high expectations, or we want to have our kids set the bar high, that at this time with the added needs of social emotional constraints or what have you, and all the just the added layers of work for both staff and parents and kids, that we understand all that. So certainly would not overlook that, but I appreciate your bringing that up.
Great, thank you. Yes, we need to, like I said, create that balance of high expectations in the instructional component, but also the emotional, social well-being of our students and our families too.
You betcha.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So I want to thank all three of our principals for sharing this evening. And at this time, I just want to go over next steps, that it would be board approval of the school plans for student achievement. The schools will implement the actions and services and review current data and evaluate progress, and then collaborate with various stakeholders and team structures to define targeted support for subgroups. So remember, it's the continuous cycle of improvement at the site level, just as we do at the district level in our plans. I also do want to acknowledge that there were a few of the plans that there were a few errors in the plans of just grammatical or things that were rolled over into the document tracking service program. And so I'm going through those still today. And I sent you the whole folder with all the school plans in it, and I will let you know when those are completely updated. So.
You're just trying to head Mrs. Cordero off at the pass.
I know. It's tough, but you know, she's been doing that to me for years. I got to be on my toes.
Hey, I did not say anything. I actually read through 6 complete plans. I did note a few little mistakes, but hey, this is a different world that we're living in right now.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Cordero.
I know the use of data is extremely important in, measuring progress. And we had no standardized testing last year. And I don't know what the status, quite honestly, is in regard to language testing for our second language learners. I know we're implementing a new assessment system this year, but we'll be looking at it, from, I think this is the window when the testing is taking place, or very soon, and then comparing it to this spring. So it would seem like we will be relying a lot on data that is not necessarily standardized, but a lot, some anecdotal, and also some just using the assessments that come with our programs. I've heard that they are planning to do assessment next spring. Has anything more been decided or whatever regarding that? And I lost my screen. I'm seeing nobody. I hope you're hearing me.
Are you going to take this one, or do you?
I will, and I apologize. My dog is really riled up right now. So if she barks, my apologies. So currently the plan is to go forward with CASP testing in the spring. They have not made any notification that will not be occurring. We are currently assessing our English learners on the initial LPAC. So all of our kindergarten students that are English language learners and new to US schools, our California schools, are being assessed. We've successfully remotely tested. I believe at last count, we were up to over 20 students. So we're very excited because it's going very well. The one test that we did receive notification this week that will not continue for this school year is the physical fitness testing due to needing to be in person and unable to do that remotely. Not certain what the time will be moving forward. So currently, as far as we know, we're going forward with all state testing.
It sounded, I mean, it's interesting you bring that up, Mrs. Cordero, because it almost sounds like when we're redesignating somebody, there's that input that the teacher was, at least in the past, to give. And I think, I think our teachers are going to be, it's going to be more their formative assessment on a weekly basis and going through their plan and assessing where the kids are, and we're going to depend more and more on them. And that's kind of a little bit kind of goes towards what Dr. Palmerston was talking about, really is kind of, and it's certainly not disregarding testing, but it's working on that improvement regardless of what that is. So that's a really salient point, I think, to what everybody's been talking about, and like even what Nicole's talking about with PE. It doesn't mean that the PE teachers aren't going to maybe have their own standards or have things that they come up with that are going to continue to motivate and engage the kids in their classes.
May I also share that the assessment we'll be moving forward with for district assessment that was chosen by our assessment coalition, which was a stakeholder group of teachers and a couple of administrators, one of whom was Ms. Caruso, who's on this call. That assessment is administered nationwide. And so it does allow some norming. And when we went into school closure last year, they were able to still assess 400,000 students. And so they feel very confident around the validity of their assessment, even being given remotely. So as we move forward to administer that first round, there will be some learning, but I think it will give us some really good baseline data in terms of where our students may have some gaps from school closure. So, and then over time, we'll be able to see that growth as our students move through the system.
Excuse me, are those the tests that are going to start in October 1st through the 16th?
Yes, Mrs. Flores, that is the assessment.
Thank you.
You good, Mr. Lara? I can't see.
I'm here. I just don't see anybody, but it all sounds good. I've got a lot of notes here, and if I have any further questions, I'll be in contact with everybody at the district, but everything sounds good.
Yeah, I think that's just because the screen is shared.
Yes, I got it back.
No, I'm just looking at. There it is. Okay.
All right. So then,
So are you looking for a motion?
it's true.
Okay. I'll move to approve the school plan for student achievement for 17 elementary and 4 junior high schools as presented today, September 23rd, 2020.
I'll second.
That's been moved by Mrs. Cordero, seconded by Mr. Lara, that the board approve the school plan for student achievement for 17 elementary and 4 junior high schools, SPSAs, as presented. Well done all. Roll call.
Mrs. Flores?
Aye.
Mrs. Cordero?
Aye.
Mr. Lara?
Aye.
Mr. Hollingshead?
Aye. All right, motion passes. And we'll move on to discussion item 7A, status update for COVID-19 and school reopening. Mr. Ontiveros.
Thank you, and I'm going to take off my mask and leave one earplug in so I can hear Mr. Lara. Do I have screen sharing, Brian? Oh, I need to get back to the beginning of my presentation here. It doesn't come up quite the way in a Chromebook that it does in your. So I want to. It's interesting to follow up on the items that were just presented because there were a couple of things that Mrs. Herrick said about the changing learning environment in 2021, which is more than just a statement. I mean, it really is the statement of all times. And so what I want to do is take an opportunity tonight because as the previous item indicated, much of the work that began last year kind of went through this maze of haze that was the COVID closure and all the things that happened in between, and just give an update on where we are at present with the idea moving forward, because there's been a lot of things that have changed over the last 2 months. More things have changed over just the last few weeks that have an impact on how we're going to be going forward. And so what I want to do is talk about school reopening, and I use air quotes because we never really closed 1920. Even though we stopped children coming to school on March 16th of last year, we picked up with that distance learning as we knew it then. We continued with our summer programs. We spent the entire spring and summer developing the plan for reentry that was presented to the board. We're in this distance learning phase right now, and you'll remember when we presented that plan, John, you said it many times, flexibility, flexibility, flexibility. And I think we were thinking a different definition of flexibility then, and it's really Gumby-like flexibility that you have to keep pace with the changes that continue to come. But I want to spend the bulk of the time about where we're headed in terms of the public health county monitoring update, because there is a whole new set of metrics that's come out over the last 6 weeks that is having an impact on us in Santa Barbara County at present that I want to make you aware of. I want to talk a little bit about the K-6 waiver process and how it connects to that concept. And then spend some more time talking about small cohort guidance. And I mentioned before the meeting, we did get an email today from a parent that although it was behind the deadline, the question was, what's the expected timeline for reopening in-person classes for special needs students? And so I'm going to address that in this small cohort piece. And then really the wild card in this is this whole COVID-19 and the testing protocols that we're currently working through in order to be able to move forward to the next phases of that plan. So when we talk about where we've been, that plan for reentry that really started for us was March 14th. March 13th was our last day of work. We were in this building nonstop over that next weekend and about over the next 2 weeks, really developing that distance learning element that we put in place from March to June, that we really learned from to build the reentry plan, not knowing what 2021 was going to look like. And again, I wrote down Mrs. Herrick's statement, what the changing learning environment in 2021 was going to be, because we were hopeful at that point that we were going to be coming back in August, just like we'd always done every year with, balloon arches and music playing at the schools. And that hasn't happened to this point. So that plan was adopted June 24th, required all those provisions for health and safety, the different elements, the on-site, the blended model, and this distance learning episodes and phases that we're proposing. And then the state budget got adopted 2 days later, and all the trailer legislation that put all the requirements around the elements that we put in the plan that really kind of reshaped that work. Then on July 17th came out the mandate from the governor that all the counties that were on that monitoring list at that point were required to open in distance learning. And so that really changed the focus from, we were really focusing on that blended design and how can we build some rhythm, having kids in and out of school, maintaining all the protocols, and really focused on just that distance learning piece. Just 17 days later, after that mandate was made, because the numbers of counties that were falling into the distance learning category continue to increase, the California Department of Public Health released the K-6 waiver guidelines that if districts were restricted, there were some conditions that on K-6 could be taken into consideration. And then just 3 weeks later, were issued these small cohort guidelines, because the K-6 waiver guidelines really weren't a natural fit with what had been in the school reopening plans and required some other logistics, especially the testing piece, which has really been the kind of the crossroads that we've hit all the way through to this point. And then just on September 4th, the public health updated the small cohort guidelines. So I'm going to go through those in a little bit of detail in a moment. So that's kind of where we've been in terms of the winding path of development around the public health situation and attempting through the departments of public health. And I want to say this, I sit in at least a weekly meeting with the Santa Barbara County Department of Public Health. Am totally humbled by the task that stands in front of them in Santa Barbara County. And am appreciative of their support. And I'll share with you some of the support that they provided to the North County directly as part of this presentation. Do not want their jobs. I mean, that's a monumental task in an environment that, we think it's difficult for schools. In the medical community, there's just, the edges are a lot farther out there, and really their responsiveness is really something to see on an ongoing basis. And so when we talk about school reopening and where we are, I'll come back to some of those other issues later. we're in this distance learning phase as a result of that July 17th order from the governor. We've continued in that status that requires distance learning. And all that preparation led to we kept the first day of school August 13th, and we really set up that launch from the 13th to the 28th of August to really get the items, the materials out that we needed to get to kids and families. And I'll talk in a minute about all the other elements that were connected to that, with the focus of initiating those distance learning schedules on August 31st. So in 4 bullet points, that's what happened from March to August 31st. The reality is, because it would not do justice of the work that's been done to not mention it. When we went into that closure and it was shelter in place, we really had no one in this facility. And for those of you that are not familiar, we're in the Sousa Center, which is our warehouse, our central kitchens here. There were very few people here. There was a real skeleton crew. In terms of business services, food service didn't stop. We served 1.2 million meals to families in our community from March to August 13th. You know, I just think of those signs in front of McDonald's, you know, how many millions served? Our food nutrition employees, 1.2 million meals to our families, which is just incredible work. Purchasing and warehouse with a skeleton crew working in conjunction with these plans being developed. Got materials ordered. We got the PPE ordered, and we all know in March and April there was no PPE to be had. Patricia McKnight our purchasing supervisor did a phenomenal job of tracing things down. I'm going to age myself, but you remember the old MASH show and how Radar always was able to connect and get things. I mean, that was phenomenal what she was able to do, and get materials packed. We had 2 and 3 people in the business office counting out notebooks, pencils, pens, the materials that kids needed for that distribution all summer long. And again, there were very few people working in the building because we were still in heightened alert around the public safety pieces. Maintenance and operations, maintaining the facilities with skeleton crews. IT, the work that was done with IT both in March and for the opening, getting equipment out to kids, continuing over the summer as things didn't operate, set up a virtual call center so we could transmit and replace. We had a whole new group of kindergartners that you know, registered that we got materials to. I mean, just some things that you don't think about that really were maybe not on page by page in the plan, but are the backbone of where we're able to get in distance learning. HR continued to hire people. We have 6 new principals this year, APs, 63 new teachers, scores of classified employees, because that merry-go-round changed, and that was with people, you know, not in the building, working remotely, staying in contact with each other. We have a new food nutrition supervisor or coordinator that you've seen through the LCAP stakeholder meetings. Carlos Murta came in day 1 and just picked up where Harold had left off. We have a new coordinator for maintenance and operations, Javier Cavazos, who came in, picked up where things left off to make sure that all of those health and safety guidelines were met. And then the instructional service team, not only with the reentry plan itself, working with groups of teachers around developing the schedules for distance learning, for blended learning, all the online registration that went on through student services with, you know, because we didn't have parents coming in and picking up packets like we've always done at 16 elementary schools. This was all virtual, all online. Tammy Castillo Schiffer set up a call center for the community liaisons to be available for parents. If you're hearing them through the wall, they're calling right now. As we're continuing to update the housing surveys that are necessary for our families to be eligible for lunch or for free lunch. The PL, the new teacher workshops, all those things to get things prepared. But then the most phenomenal part is what's happening in our schools, right? Our school staff's taking that and making those connections, getting connected to kids, getting the resources out. You know, connecting with each other, learning this stuff on the fly. There's a few of them that I won't say that have more gray hair than me, but there are many folks out on our sites that are my vintage, right, that aren't computer savvy, that have just learned, are demonstrating what's necessary. So I don't want to walk by how monumental this task has been. I don't want to walk by the appreciation for our folks and all the effort that's come in, because there's frustration with it too. It's all brand new. But like I said months ago, if we stick together, we can do this. We can do it together, and it really has happened. And then I want to just commend our kids. You know, when you get an opportunity to see kids, and Vita's shaking her head because she's got some of them in her house that are doing the distance learning, right? To see them on the screens, the joy that you see in their faces. And then finally our parents, just phenomenal. You know, this is a huge undertaking. And to be able to support families. I was talking to a principal week before last who was invited into a room by one of the teachers at the site, looked into a living room where families are sharing their kids so that some can go to work, right? And they're kind of rotating off 10 children in the living room of a house, each of them on their own Zoom, some of them looking at each other's Zoom, right? Because that's what kids do, right? But just connected. And it's, you know, but it's happening. And so I don't want to walk by, because I know this has been a huge undertaking, but it's taken some phenomenal teamwork and some phenomenal folks to make it happen. And I'm so appreciative and so impressed with what's happened to this point. We've worked a lot of kinks out, got a lot of kinks left, because to quote Mrs. Herrick, we're in a changing learning environment 2021 like we've never seen before. And so I wanted to share this because Brian Rickey shares these metrics each week with Cabinet. These are the numbers from last week, and I apologize, it's kind of hard to see, and I got to put my glasses on to read it. I can't, I don't know that I can, and I'll probably screw up my screen sharing, so I'll read you the number. 99.5% of students were logged into our systems, our programs during the week of the 15th, 99.5%. I believe Brian said in Cabinet, we're down to 23 students that were continuing to work to connect, and I think his thumb's going down because that number's down since then. And again, the teamwork, the outreach, right? 99.5% of our kids, because we talked in the last, when we looked at the LCP at the last meeting, did the public hearing, that difference between attendance and engagement, right? 99.5% of our kids last week were connected. Now, you know, is the challenge, you know, I've always said that being a kindergarten teacher is the fast track to sainthood, right? But being a kindergarten teacher on Zoom, in fact, any of our educators and our classified staff and our parents and our kids that are working on Zoom, God bless them, right? Because they are adapting to this changing learning environment in 2021 like nobody's business. And so this is, you know, a credit to everyone that we've been able to get to this point, you know, and kind of work out some of these kinks. It's only been, tomorrow will be 6 weeks since the first day of school. This is just the 4th week of this distance learning module, distance learning mode. But I think we've learned a lot, and I've learned a lot about the power of teamwork and the power of our folks working together for the benefit of our kids. I heard Christina and Lisa and Mark say it over and over again in their presentations: support, support, support. How do we continually get better? Because this changing learning environment in 2021 that we're in, it's going to continue to change. And we got to make sure that we're taking that learning with us every step of the way. And so, although we're in distance learning, we're trying to make distance learning better every day. So I want to go over where we're headed. That being said, because there is some change in this public health environment, and it's change for the better at this point for California. But you look nationally, and there's some trends the opposite direction. But I think the plan that we put forth is getting a little bit of a toehold, knock on wood. And so I want to update you just on this information, because as a board, so often we bring plans to you that we've been working on for months, and we need you to approve them, right? And without all that opportunity for all the input, and I think of Rebecca's slide where we put that cycle of continuous improvement. You know, we've tried to continue that engagement with the community, but it's been difficult in this environment. So this information is particularly important. So I want to go over a little bit with the public health county monitoring update and what that looks like now under the latest iteration. I want to talk just briefly about the K-6 waiver process. And when I talk about monitoring, you'll understand why. I just want to talk about it briefly. I want to spend a little time talking about small cohort guidance and what that means and what the implications are, and give you opportunities for questions and input. And then I want to talk about what I know about COVID-19 testing protocols today. Today is September 23rd. And so we talk about where we're headed, this public health county monitoring update. On August 28th, California changed to what they call a blueprint for a safer economy. And the title's important because in the larger context around COVID-19, school closure has a big impact on the economy. And I have come to understand that in all these meetings with public health, because the Department of Public Health works for the County Board of Supervisors, and the County Board of Supervisors represents all sectors of the county, not just schools. And so when I say how thankful I am to parents and how humbled I am by what's happening with parents, they're really juggling like, you know, I'm just fortunate my children aren't, grateful my children aren't in school, because people are making sacrifices, choices every day as parents to support their children, and sometimes sacrificing opportunities for, gainful employment to support their children, and sharing and caring like never before. And so this whole framework is really built around how do we get the economy rolling again. And it's hard for me, because my whole life has been in public education, to think beyond the four walls of our schools. That to understand how we fit in that larger landscape is important in this new design. Because the previous monitoring system was built around 5 specific data points. They were these 2 that are now in the public health metrics in this blueprint: case rates and test positivity. Previously, it was hospitalization rates, hospital capacity, and then ventilator usage. Those are no longer, because some of the public health emphasis has decreased the stress on those 3 elements. Now this system is built around just tracking these 2: the case rates, which is the cases, daily cases per 100,000 in a county, and then the test positivity. What percentage of tests that are administered are returning positive? So each county is identified as falling into one of 4 tiers based on the metrics over 2 one-week measurements. So every 7 days, there's a reporting snapshot. And those are lagging snapshots. So we're always a week behind. So when I share the data with you in a minute, it'll make a little more sense. But it's because it takes a while to collect the data. The data for that was just released yesterday was through, and yesterday was the 22nd, was through Friday the 12th. And so it's always a whole Friday behind as they do these calculations. And those 2 weeks are combined to determine where a county falls within tiers. And these are the tiers. I think if I can get my screen to advance, there we go. And this is the risk of community disease transmission. Widespread being tier 1, which is purple, and currently Santa Barbara County falls within that widespread tier. And that is determined by a rate per 100,000 population case rate of more than 7 per 100,000, and or a testing positivity rate greater than 8%. And for any one of these categories, if there's a split, for example, if the case rate is beyond 7, but the testing positivity rate is below 8, a county is assigned the higher risk tier. So if one of the indicators is purple and the other red, the county stays purple. If one is red and the other's orange, the county stays in red. You stay in the more restrictive tier. And right now, Santa Barbara County is purple. This is the actual website that just came up a couple of weeks ago. I want to share it with you because it contains it reflective of the information. I'll share this presentation with the board in the Friday packet so you can dig through. But what this does is it applies those metrics against every county. Are you still seeing that on your screens? Or are you seeing me? Okay. You seeing me mistype Santa Barbara? So when you put in Santa Barbara County, there we are, we're a widespread status. And what I'm scrolling over quickly right now is what that means for each of these sectors within the economy. Because again, this is the purpose. How does this impact each of these elements? And the change was to make sure that there was a standard set of conditions for each sector across the 58 counties in the state. But what happens is when you get to the bottom, this is the statewide, you see this total as of the September 12th reporting date, statewide, there's a 6.4% positive cases per day per 100,000 population statewide. A 3.6% daily positive test rate and this is within that 7-day span from Saturday, the 6th of September to the 12th of Friday, the 12th of September. And then if you click on the county, this is Santa Barbara County. We're purple, widespread. Our case rate, 6.7 per 100,000, which is below that 7 rate. But in the last reporting cycle, Santa Barbara County was at 9.1. So we continue that you have to be in a lesser tier for 2 weeks before the tier level changes. So we remain in purple for the time being. Our positivity rate is below 8. So the only thing that's keeping Santa Barbara County in purple at the moment is that 6.7 adjusted case rate. Okay, so that comes out every Tuesday based on the 2 Fridays before that Tuesday. So on the 29th, we will get the update to the 19th. And so this is going to be an interesting time because the 19th is about 2 weeks from Labor Day. And what's happened previously around these holidays, we've seen an uptick, right, across the country, but especially across Santa Barbara. I mean, we really spiked over the summer because there was a lot of gathering and a lot of, the things that hadn't quite been locked down yet, the messaging about wearing masks and things of that nature. So this is the new system. Oh, wrong presentation because I can't see the other one under my screen share. So that's kind of the background for that new tracking system. So when we look at Santa Barbara County in particular, the county is replicating the data in a similar fashion. And so this is the county surveillance metrics, and that's what this is all based on, surveilling the progress of transmission. And so this shows that 2-week trend that we were at 9.1 based on the 9/5 snapshot, which put the county in purple, 6.7 on the 12th. But because one of those 2 weeks is in purple, we remain in that purple zone. I'm going to read from the text right above that purple line. Santa Barbara County is currently in the widespread tier of the framework. As of September 22nd, the county has met the criteria for red for one of the 2 consecutive weeks. If the county is able to achieve 2 consecutive weeks of red criteria, then the state will officially allow the county to move to the red tier on September 29th. Santa Barbara County needs to be officially assigned to the red tier for 14 days before schools can reopen. So what that means is the first day of possible reopening for schools in Santa Barbara County would be October 13th. Okay, so 3 weeks from today. All right. What's also in this array by the county, if you see where my cursor is, they're calculating what our rate would be based on 7 consecutive days with that 7-day lag from today. So that state accounting went through the 12th. Today's the 23rd. So what I'm going to show you is the county has collected daily case information, these daily new cases across the county, and this is really hard to see. So if you see the cursor, that's the 16th, which was a week ago today. There were 26 new positive cases in the county, 12 on the 15th, 27 on the 14th, 9 on the 13th, 28 on the 12th, 37 on the 11th, 40 on the 10th. So on that 7-day aggregate, when you take the average of those 7 days and you calculate that out per 100,000 over that 7-day period, the case rate for Santa Barbara County is 5.6. Now there will be some backfill on some of those because there are results that will come back that will be attributed to those dates, because what I've learned from public health is the date is attributed to the day the test was taken. So there are some results on some of those dates that haven't been identified yet, so that will change. But as of what we know today, then the case rate moving forward for the 16th is 5.6. So if it stays on that same flat curve by the 19th, which is Friday, or I'm sorry, last Friday, we'll know what that rate is as they backfill those dates. So if it's 5.6 on the 19th, which would get reported next week, then we'd have 2 consecutive weeks in red. Okay. Are you with me? Because I just stay up all night looking at this stuff. It's so fascinating to me, and I can't understand why, All right, so that's kind of where the county is. So a question that came up in our meeting last week with public health was, our county's not a plain vanilla county. There are different areas within the county that are recording different rates. And so I have been in conversation with epidemiologists from the county over the last week, really knowledgeable about statistics, has taught me many, many things. I think I took statistics 3 times in college before I earned a passing grade. But what they've done is generated some regionalized data that I put it in the spreadsheet, but I'm going to go back to that county site first, if I can find it. Let's see that. Because in addition to those county-wide rates that I was showing you, these are the daily positives. They've also begun generating 7-day rolling averages by community. And if you can see this top line across the top, this gray line, that represents Santa Maria itself. We are and I knew this, that we had higher transmission rates in Santa Maria than the rest of the county. So my question to public health was, hey, it's all well and good that the county is below on average, but if we're the outlier, I need to know that information. Because when we talk about reopening or bringing children back to our schools, we're talking about, getting out of that sheltered environment and the possibility of increasing transmission rates. And so, I had taken this data before they started publishing this, and I'll go back to this spreadsheet. First, this is the county. This is when I started these conversations with the county, and I apologize because this is really small. But I started tracking the county data and plugging it into this spreadsheet. And so on on the 5th of September, I was tracking these daily rates, doing the calculations, the average, applying it against the countywide population of 456,373, and then multiplying by 1,000. I calculated on the 5th, that first reporting date on the 2-week cycle on the statewide reporting, that our county was at 9.7. The state reported 9.1. And so I met with that epidemiologist. He said, well, you're counting those that what they're doing in that statewide is extracting positives from prisons. And there's also a factor that's applied against the numbers of tests that are being administered. Santa Barbara County is administering below average the number of tests statewide. So we kind of get handicapped on our numbers. And so what the state is doing in its calculations is popping that up a little bit, saying, we're not really testing enough to know what your true case rate is. And so so there's a whole, in that, when you get back into that website, there's a whole quotient that's applied if you're a certain percentage below statewide. So we were reported, I reported a little higher because I was including those prison cases at the Lompoc prison. But on the 19th, that 6.7, that was on the 12th, that's what we had that showed on that statewide report that I just shared that got us into red. Today's based on the data from the 16th, the 5.6 is connected to the 5.6 countywide that the countywide system shows. So I shared these calculations with the epidemiologist, said, am I doing the math right? She said, yes. And I said, then I need the Santa Maria numbers. And what I did is I took the case rates in Santa Maria, applied them against the quotient here. Our population is 99,553. And so when the countywide rate reported by the state was 9.1, in Santa Maria, it was 13.63. So we have a higher transmission rate. The day that was reported on the 12th, when it was 6.7 for the county, in Santa Maria, we're at 9.04 still. And as of today, which is going back to a week from today, on the 16th, the county rate at 5.6, Santa Maria is at 7.6. So that's important information because I meet weekly with the superintendents from the Valley. We share families, we share kids, you know, between Guadalupe and Orchid and Santa Maria Bonita and Blockman and the high school district. There's a bigger transmission than just Oakley School or Bruce School. We got to think about those community impacts. And so this is the data that as we strategize, because of the 4 counties in the area between Guadalupe, Orchid, the high school district, and Santa Maria Bonita, we're trying to keep contact with each other so that we're responding in similar fashions, not identical, but similar. The school, you know, Orchid and the high school district with their high school programs, they're really pushing for bringing back athletic training, which has a different set of controls than those classroom environments. So I wanted to share that with you because we're seeing schools in South County, Cold Spring, which has 85 kids. They have applied for a waiver and they've had it approved, and they will be moving forward. Montecito, which has 270 kids, right? And has the opportunity for that physical spacing. We're the 14 largest elementary schools in the county exist in Santa Maria Bonita. And so we've got to think more strategically around how we make this work, because the last consequence, you go back to that blueprint, it's for a safer economy. How do we ensure that what we do doesn't throw sand in those gears, but what we're doing is really keeping that forward progress going? And so I say that as, you know, the questions come in about when are we going to get kids back in school like the old days? It's a long ways off, but there are some things that that we've already begun that I'm going to share with you that we got in the works that I'm interested in getting feedback, but also to know that that's what's happening in the other districts in the area as well. because we don't want to do anything that's gonna, gonna have a negative effect on, it's not just neighboring districts, it's on our families that share districts. It's on our neighbors, right? We got to think on a larger scale because it's more than just a school issue at this point. So any questions on the data and where it stands at this point? Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is it's a multi-step problem, right? And we've got to think in the multiple steps. We can't just think in the singular steps. And so when we talk about where we're headed, based on that public health county monitoring update, knowing that on a countywide basis, we're likely to be red by next week, and that will open the door. And as long as the countywide trend goes down, there is the eligibility to open schools in this county without a waiver by the 13th. So because that school waiver process required a 2-week lead at this point for schools in Santa Barbara County that haven't already filed a waiver, there's no real point in filing a waiver, because once we're in that red status across the county, that a waiver is no longer a requirement. Okay, so that, as I started to prepare for this last week, that was a longer conversation, but as the data changes, it changes the conversation, because what was Mrs. Herrick's quote? We're in a changing learning environment in 2021. So again, as of this is what I just shared with you. As of the 22nd, we're in red. If we continue in red, then schools will be eligible for reopening on the 13th. So what it lends us to is this small cohort guidance. And this is reflective in the initial school closure and the reopening things was, a consideration to provide support for highest need students. There are some counties that because their rates were different, have been able to maintain programs for students with special needs since closure. Marin County kept their special day class, county moderate to severe classes open from March to the present. My question to our county public health back in July was, what do we need to do that? And their response was, our transmission rates are too high. Right, we need to get a hold on the transmission rates first, because we don't want to do something that's going to, make a bad situation worse. And I totally get it, right? And so I've just been in their ear constantly, because this isn't my field. Public health medicine isn't my field. I got to trust them, but I've got to know the answers to those questions. So out of that guidance, this describes which schools can be served in cohorts, which is not a waiver, which is not a reopening. So a determination is made at the LEA school level based on the needs of students. Students with disabilities should be prioritized by the LEA and school for receiving targeted supports and services. We've continued to provide assessments because we had a period of time where we got behind on assessments. I want to shout out to our special services folks that are our program specialists. Megan, Christy, Julie really came up with some protocols for administering assessments. We're trying to that hole was deep. We're trying to fill that hole a little bit. In addition, English learners, students at higher risk for further learning loss, which is really one of the key components of that continuity plan, or not participating in distance learning. And we've done a good job, but we know that we can do better. Students at risk of neglect, foster youth, students at homelessness are also prioritized. So that's really the focus of this cohort design. So this is the actual guidance. It was updated. Again, it originally came out in August, was updated in September. So it talks about a stable group of no more than 14 children, no more than 2 supervising adults, or a configuration that's no more than 16 that really maintain as a cohort. Don't intermingle anywhere else with anyone else on a school site. Supervised care environments. keeping cohorts separated, because if you remember when we talked about the reentry plan originally, one of the big issues of even doing the blending learning was serving meals, right? Because they couldn't be in congregate settings. So really maintaining that distance around meal service, keeping kids even in playground settings separated just within those cohorts, with the concept behind that being in the event that there is a positive test within that bubble or within the bubble that someone within that bubble interacts with in a family setting, that we know exactly who those cohorts are for the purposes of contact tracing. And so this was interesting to me because this is silent on testing, right? This doesn't say that you have to test. When the requirement of the reentry plan was when you brought back larger groups of students, there was a requirement for testing. And this is why I've got surveillance testing as a separate item later on in this presentation. Because when we went back to, so this, I want to show you, there's just this thought. Our students with moderate to severe disabilities, as we identify cohorts, really are that population, the highest need population, right? To really think and would provide us an opportunity with small groups to really strengthen some of those health and safety protocols that we put in place in the attestation and the plan. You know, even when we started bringing adults back onto school campuses around the 1st of August, there was a lot of anxiety about, right, coming in. Even the first time we all met here and we were masked up, right, it's still awkward, but, you know, we kind of got over the awkwardness. So I want to commend all of our folks on our school sites, folks who work here in the Sousa Center, really adhering to those core concepts, because we know they work. It's a whole nother kettle of fish starting to bring others onto campus. And so starting with those cohorts would give us an opportunity to build some bandwidth around those protocols and those procedures, and would be addressing our students at highest need. And then we would prioritize additional cohorts based on what we learn, right? So let's get a stake in the ground, learn from it. This is the Department of Public Health small cohort notification process, and this just came out week before last. And so the ongoing conversation, this is, I think maybe I can make this one bigger. If I lose the screen, save me, Brian. So although the California Department of Public Health issued guidance for small cohorts with these same requirements, no more than 14 children or youth, no more than 16, targeted support service and specialized service for a specific subset of youth. The number of students participating can exceed 25% of a school's enrollment. So it starts small, get good at it. Interactions between cohorts prevented. The schools should develop plans in collaboration with local health officials. This has been a sticking point as I've had conversations with public health, because as I read those initial guidelines, it wasn't, you know, there's no expectation of COVID testing as long as you maintain the safety protocols. What has come out over the last week and a half, it'll be 2 weeks tomorrow, a change from public health saying you're required to surveillance test, which means you got to test every individual on that site, right? Every individual, not just those that are part of the cohort and say the assistant principal and the principal and the health aide and whoever might interact. Everybody on a site has to be tested. So when we talk about special day classes, for us, that's 11 sites. And so you figure on average, we've got about 100 employees on a site. That's 1,100 tests. And right now that's more than the county's able to provide for us. So we're working, I'll talk a little bit more about this. We're working in conjunction with different agencies to determine how can we logistically do that to meet that criteria. And I understand the county's purpose behind it. It's going to grow. So let's make sure we get the testing protocol in place first before you start growing out, because you don't want to get big and then say, oh, we should have been. So and again, to connect to that larger safer economy concept. I totally understand. Logistically, it's been a challenge for us. I want to give credit to Matt Beecher and Sean Chenoweth have been in contact with these various vendors. We've been in contact, the superintendents together, because we're all in the same boat. How can we make this happen to ensure the greatest degree of safety? And so this requires this consultation. I have a consultation with the Deputy Director of Public Health on Friday afternoon. We're going to sit down. I'm going to have Matt and Sean sit in on that conversation, because this is really the sticking point. How do we make sure that we're meeting the responsibility around the testing piece? It's not a requirement in all counties, but I understand why it's a requirement in Santa Barbara County. But more importantly, when you look at the data just in Santa Maria, I understand why it's got to be a requirement in Santa Maria, because we're still over that limit, and it won't take much for us to flip. Because if we talk about, 1,000 kids across the districts back and forth between families, that runs the risk of spike in that rating. Do you have a question, Ms. Cordero?
Well, do we have 1,000 kids in our special day class?
Oh, no, I'm talking about between Orchid, Guadalupe, and the high school district. But we've got about 700, and not all parents, so part of that will be getting feedback. Not all parents necessarily would want their children back at this point. But regardless of how many children come back, we've got to test everybody on those sites. And then the question I had with public health on Tuesday was, we're sending food out to all those sites from a central location, and our folks in the warehouse. Would the expectation be test them and then everybody here? And to her credit, the gal from public health said, that's a great question. We need to have a conversation about that, because their bandwidth isn't within schools, right? They're public health specialists. And so they seal things off and close things down, and that they don't really have a full understanding of the accordion nature of schools. People come and go, right? And of Santa Maria itself, when you look, we've got multiple families living together, right? And kids going to multiple schools, and really, I want to make sure that we're really wrapping our heads around that, so that we're not contributing, making the problem worse than it's been.
And how often will the testing be?
The surveillance testing is, you have to test everybody on every campus within a 2-month period. So that's, an eighth of people every 2 weeks would be an acceptable protocol. So the small schools like Cold Spring that has 20 people on their site, they had them all parking lot on the first day, line up, test them, done. Right? It's the logistics to find somebody that can manage that and get the results back to us.
And who pays for all that?
That's
$1,000 question.
well, and again, to me, it's less the cost, because we go back to what Rebecca talked about in that plan. Those resources for mitigation could be addressed. We're working with our insurance providers to really determine, the what before the how.
That conversation has to happen as soon as possible.
Friday at 2.
I know, and that's as soon as it can happen.
Yeah.
I mean, what are we doing now with,
It's
coming back a couple days a week?
What we're operating under now is the attestation that we put in place over the summer that was based off of that. And this is my last slide, was really that whole notion I explained to you, all the COVID pieces that we're trying to unwrap at this time. We're not required at this point, because under those, when I scrolled through that big list of industries, right, schools are different than just school support. So the attestation that we filed for not having children on campus, we were functioning under an office setting. And so we have adults there. We're doing the screening, the temperature, all the things that we're doing, the physical distancing, just like when you go to Lowe's, right? You're not, no, but right, but they're making sure you're wearing a mask, the social distancing, it's maintaining all those criteria. There was an added layer on schools to do the screening, and we chose to do the active screening, to do the temperature taking, just to have that extra data piece. We've got, we purchase masks. Folks are wearing masks. I mean, and I say, I give credit to all of our employees have really realized that this is what has to be done. And even when you see that, you know, families with young kids around town, there's, you know, they're wearing masks. We're realizing, but we need to make sure as we're staying on the forward lean on that decline and not contribute to a spike. And so that's the COVID piece that we've really got to get resolved in order to be able to move forward and really initiate those plans and those strategies.
Well, that needs to be explained to well and shared so that the community understands. Because that was, you know, one of my number one concerns had to do with how are we going to do testing with our staffs, let alone, you know, what about kids? And then, you know, if we do start to bring back small cohorts of you know, special needs kids, you know, how do we manage that and maintain those cohorts and no internet? I mean, even in implementing a hybrid model of return, you know, even if you only have half of your student population on campus, that's not truly a realistic expectation. You can keep every group separate from every other group.
Yeah, but the more you can adhere to that, the greater you can mitigate, right? And so it's just the consciousness, and that really is that was the key part of that plan was, you know, the logistics of, you know, the directionality in hallways, the, you know, not allowing the sharing of stuff that we normally would just pass around the classroom. It's going to take some real commitment to that process, and that's why starting with the cohort with a small group will give us an opportunity to get the logistics down that we can learn from, just like we've learned in distance learning. But it's really going to take some, we need to get some strict clarification from the county on that testing protocol in order to be able to determine, you know, how do we deliver that? And that's what we're doing on Friday, is getting the real logistics. Because when I shared with you you know, that communication from the county, there was only 2 or 3 lines. You know, the spaces are the big part.
Yeah.
And that's why I said I just need to be able to sit down with somebody who can tell me exactly what the expectation is.
I know, you know, when adults that I may see, not that I'm out and about all that much, but, you know, they just say, so when are schools going to open? And, you know, my response has been and will continue to be, you know, the rate of infection may be going down countywide, but we have to look at what is occurring locally. And as long as we're at the top of that, it's not likely going to happen soon or quickly. And that's just for the safety of everyone.
And I guess the point I want to make is what you just said is absolutely correct. When soon occurs, it's still not going to occur quickly.
No.
Right. We're going to need to be very strategic about, you know, how we enter into this to make sure that once we do it, we're not undoing it. Because there's some criteria in the reopening guidelines. Even if you're allowed to totally reopen, if there's an infection or a case at a school, you're only required to close down that classroom. Well, I'd be hard pressed to think that anybody else who's on that campus is going to be comfortable with. We're only going to close down one classroom, right? We have siblings in classrooms across the campus, you know, and what I've said many times is we closed every school in the county back in March based on one positive case in the entire county, right?
Yeah.
And here we've got a positivity rate, but I think we're understanding how we can mitigate this, but it's how do we sustain it? And so we want to make sure that we're entering into it with our eyes wide open so that we can continue. We don't want to seesaw back and forth out of this.
No, we don't.
And what I don't think I understand, and I don't know, maybe my husband and I are weird, but you know, when the testing facility opened in Santa Maria, you know, obviously we were not in any group of essential workers, so we waited a couple of months. But you know, when I could go online and schedule an appointment within a day or two, that said to me, they're not packed. And we've been 3 times just out of precaution. And a couple of times there was nobody that was before us and nobody came after. And I know they schedule more than one appointment in each half-an-hour block. So the use of that free opportunity is not being taken advantage of.
And again, that goes to, that's part of the logic behind the requirement that schools do test more than what the state guidelines say. Because countywide, we do need to get the testing rate up. And I understand from where public health is coming from. But again, when you're talking about organization the size of ours, that takes some, you know, some strategy to determine how can you do that to ensure that we're meeting that requirement. And that's really the initial, that's our point of meeting on Friday, is to really get what are the strict guidelines. Because up until a week ago yesterday, when those cohort guidelines first came out, it was, no, you don't have to test. And then 2 days later, it was, wait a minute, you do.
But I think the other thing that happened, Mrs. Cordero, was that there was such a shortage in reagent and such a lengthy period of time for people to get a result back that it really wasn't meaningful. So there was a strong outpouring of information there that the testing that was available was not timely, and so I think there was definitely a drop off in the demand as a result of that. And some of what's going to happen with the testing now is that when it's quicker or faster turnaround, the test is less specific, so the specificity drops. So you're going to, and this is I think part of what I think the delay with the public health is trying to ascertain how frequently, aside from what Mr. Ontiveros is saying with the 2-week windows, how many times people need to be tested so that specificity, while it's not great, becomes more meaningful, so that we can understand where that is. And I think, you know, to Mr. Ontiveros's point too, we're trying to mitigate or control what we can control.
Right.
It's like my office, right? When we ask the questions, we take the temperature, and we do all those things, but we don't. It's not the NBA or the WNBA where they're living in a bubble and not making contact. I think that's probably our greatest difficulty.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's why I say the Apple model, because my daughter works for Apple, has some of those holes filled. There's a definite routine, there's a definite requirement, there's an expedient way to get that test back. They mail it to your door, you administer it, you send it in. You're required to take the test so many times, but you can do it weekly by choice. So something is going on out there. I just wish it would catch on to a lot of other organizations. I know it's a cost though, and they may have bought up, you know, a lab or two to do this because their results are very speedy. And a small outbreak happened and they were able to contain the 2 individuals very quickly and no one else was infected, but it was just very clean and very productive and very quick. And that's what we need to keep everyone healthy. a way to do that. And I'm hoping over here it's happening in conversation often so that as we need it, and we're going to need a lot of that, it's going to be there.
There was an interesting, this is kind of a little bit divergent, but there was an interesting thing in the news today about Apple and Google getting together with a function on the phone that detects your proximity to somebody who has tested positive and stuff, which doesn't work very well at all in its current form. But there is another form in other countries where there's high compliance that works fairly well. So it could, I mean, who knows how things are going to change and how rapidly they're going to change. So we can only plan for today.
Yeah, we can only plan. Yeah, we can plan for today and the next 2 weeks. Right.
As, you know, like we're pretending to be God over here every so often. It's just tremendous pressure.
You're right, Mrs. Cordero. I think that question is going to get posed to us time and time again because there's also national news about places that are going back to school, have gone back to school, are in different forms of school, and you know, the folks in Orange County who are dealing with, you know, their stuff within their own county of some schools wanting to go back or not and what have you. So I think you're right on that the response is that you're talking about, I think is just what people need to hear and how to get them to self-inform.
As you know, I was in Montana for our last meeting, and the big news there after the weekend was in the county was that there were 5 new cases. 5. I mean, and all the same protocols, you know, signs posted everywhere, wear a mask. The only museums weren't open. I didn't check out, you know, like beauty shops or anything like that, but I did see kids were going to school. We happened to be driving by a school at dismissal, and you know, parents were there picking their kids up wearing masks. And I mean, everywhere, every business we went into required a mask. And even, you know, in travel, they're constant reminders. So it is.
Wash your hands.
It was very different, but seems to be fairly effective. I didn't come home feeling like, oh my, but to be cautious, you know, we did have another test, and at that point in time, we were good. So
thank you for the extensive information you provided us, Mr. Ontiveros. That was
Thank you.
really, really good, and we know where to go, and also, I think, as Mrs. Cordero said, how to help folks out who ask those questions of us. We'll tell them all go to you.
Perfect.
So I guess anyone who is listening or watching, you know, if you have an opportunity to schedule a test for yourself, I think it's lhi.com online. You can do it. There's no cost.
Rite Aid is also giving tests.
And you can do
They're
drive-through.
quick. They're very quick. So several essential workers needed to be tested, and they got the results very quickly.
We were tested Thursday, and Saturday morning our results came. So I don't think 2 days is.
You just have to quarantine until you get your results. That's, you know, common sense.
But, you know, and you know, the test is for that moment in time only. I get that, but there is a sense of relief that, you know, you're not deluding yourself with a sense of being fine. when you're really not. And I know some people are asymptomatic, but I think most of us kind of know if something different is going on.
Asymptomatic, and there's false positives too.
Have a baseline, because you don't know. Right. You really don't. So, got to have a baseline.
There's nobody out there saying, yeah, I've had COVID before. This is how it feels. I've been it. All right, so I'll acknowledge for the receipt of the status update on COVID-19 and school reopening. And on item 8, board and superintendent reports. Do you have anything, Mr. Lara? Anyone? Bueller? Bueller shakes his head.
No, I'm just going to have to take bigger vitamins. This is exhausting stuff daily on Zoom and distance learning with grandchildren.
You eat a lot of carrots, Bugs Bunny, so your eyes don't.
It is exhausting.
We've even ordered, there's a blue kind of tinged glasses because, and they're helping. They really are because.
That's the kids for testing, right?
No, it's just.
The little blue paper that you put on for testing.
Yeah.
And I've shared everything I have to share.
I got nothing, Mr. Ontiveros.
I just want to, in reflecting on the opening of school, what I neglected to mention was the opportunity that we didn't get that we normally would have taken with the opening of Live in School.
Yeah.
And I want to commend the staff there that has really created that, an environment out of a school that's brand new, right? And really, making that happen has been phenomenal. We would have been over there with balloons and cake and all that, and didn't get this opportunity. But I want to welcome the Libin team, into the fold, and welcome to the changing learning environment in 2021.
I think we need to quote that at every school right now and put it on a banner.
And again, I want to thank Rebecca and Melissa and the whole instructional services team on the work of that LCP together. I mean, that was to have that done by the end of September when we're just starting school was a challenge. And then I also want to mention that earlier today, I had an opportunity to sit in a session that was organized by Melissa and Jennifer Loftus and Sarah Cameron for all of our junior high school counselors and high school administrative teams, along with counselors from the high school district in Guadalupe, on really establishing some K-12 counseling norms, some standards that we can utilize to connect our systems, particularly on that college career readiness. We've got those CCI indicators, that CCR college career readiness profile last year as part of that tier 1 work. And while we're in distance learning, we can't let that pass because this is still the year kids are going to get. So we had about 45 people in a Zoom session today with folks from the Hatchings Institute. We'll go again tomorrow, and it's scheduled throughout the year to build that network around our counseling professionals who provide just so much support for, not our kids, our families, our staffs, our community at large. So I want to thank that team for organizing that work. Just like all the other things that are going on that you don't see, that's some of the lasting, sustainable work that will benefit children throughout our community for a long time.
Yes, everyone is working very, very hard. I want to acknowledge that because just being on the other side of that classroom screen is exhausting. Trying to keep just 2 children focused and engaged in their learning is a very challenging time. So my hat is on. Honestly, I'm afraid. Can't hear you.
All right, we'll move on to the closed session.
Thank you.